Welcome back to the Runes of Ranudar. This is an episodic fantasy fiction currently being published on Royal Road, and there's a link below in the description. There are currently over 50 chapters of the story available there for your reading enjoyment. A brief recap of our previous episode. Our adventurers have paddled treacherous seas to Finna's realm, the ancient sea cave, which is the entry to the mysterious island of Mundy Head. And now, Chapter 10. Black hexagonal columns formed a narrow set of steps along the edge of the cavern. They clung carefully to the wall as they gingerly hopped from one slick rock to the next, slowly making their way back towards the cave entrance. Below, the incoming tide roared into the cave. Soon they were soaked with spray. Shellah looked back towards their little boat, each end tied securely, and nestled within what little shelter she could find for it amongst the boulders out of the direct crash of the waves. It would have to hold. Nessa squealed a little as she slipped on a stone. Jonas steadied her from behind. Lowell led the way up, bracing himself with his shillelagh, leaping from stone to stone like a plaid-clad old goat. "We don't have to hurry, you two," Jonas said. "Be careful." Shellah followed from the rear, shouldering a heavy bag of gear and some extra rope. She grimaced as her knee complained about the tall steps. It was a staircase for giants. "Stop when you get to the top. We go onto the head together. Remember, that's what you're paying Jonas and I for." Soon they were scrambling on hands and knees as the stones grew even more tall and sloped, and then they were enveloped in the thick mist at the top of the peak. As Shellah crested the ledge, panting, she joined the others already seated on the moss and lichen to recover, peering out into the low, drifting clouds, revealing and concealing tumuli in the moorlands, the barrow mounds. Some were crested with rings of stones, others had singular markers. A wan ray of noon sun briefly backlit a horned silhouette in the fog. "You would really have to love or hate someone to bury them up here," Shellah remarked as she shrugged off her pack. "Folks, is there a plan?" Nessa looked through her own smaller sack and pulled out a few items, including what looked to be a crystalline stone or lump of glass mounted in the end of a short metal rod. "Yes, Lowell and I discussed it this morning. I have some ideas of what to look for." "It'll be a large mound, possibly with 2 rows of stones," continued Lowell. "If it is the Craddock burial, they likely will have used an existing mound from the old peoples, and his disciples will have added a second ring of more modern stones to further concentrate its power." "Power for what? The hogboon?" asked Jonas, staring off in the distance where the horned being had stood. "No, for the rune within," said Nessa. The lowering clouds now dropped a steady drizzle. "Let's get going," said Shellah after a bite of stale scone and a sip of water. She pulled a smaller sack out of the larger one. "Leave whatever you don't need. This is just some camp gear and extra food in case we get stuck up here. Also, it marks our spot so we can find our way back down." She adjusted her sword belt, then took some torches and the shovel from the larger pack. Nessa held out her metal rod, the stone end nestled in her palm. "It's this way." "Let's keep to the low ground until we're at a likely barrow," said Lowell. "No sense in engaging any of the other hogboons." "What's that you're holding?" Shellah asked Nessa as they followed her slowly through the soggy grass. Nessa opened her hand to display it better. "This is an animasser. Sorcery is a combination of locus, where your power sits, and focus, how you're directing your efforts. You can store and combine locus and focus into an artifact such as an amasser to build your power and aid in spellwork. I made this at university." "You can make those now?" exclaimed Lowell. "That isn't a relic?" "Shh," Jonas said. "I hear something." They all stopped. Nearby, something snorted. An enormous horned beast walked across their path, an aurochs. It looked at them for a moment, then disappeared back into the fog. Another smaller one followed it, then a couple of calves. "How did those get up here?" asked Shellah. "Wait a moment." Lowell pointed out a barrow. "Let's quickly look at this one." They walked the perimeter of the mound until they saw a low stone lintel entry. It had no door. Shellah peered around, her hand on her sword hilt. There was no sign of a hogboon. Lowell motioned them to follow him inside the mound. Around the doorway was inscribed the characteristic artwork of the old people, spirals and beasts common to the Shielings, and inside the mound, from what they could see in the dim light of the entrance, open niches were filled with small pottery jars and neatly arranged bones. "This looks to be a traditional Auckland burial site," said Lowell as they exited. "They cremate their dead, which would be the only way they could possibly get a corpse up those rocks. Some of these interments look recent. And they still believe spirits walk on in the afterlife, so they leave an open door so they can be free and provide them with food and grain for their journey." "Such as the fortune beef we just saw wandering about," said Jonas. "Brought up as babies, I suppose, and left here to forage. Our hog boons." "I bet most of them anyway," said Lowell. "A small relief? So I imagine we're looking for something completely out of the ordinary up here, burial-wise." "It would help if we were able to see," said Jonas, waving a hand in the mist. "Let's keep going. I feel it's this way," said Nessa. They followed barely visible trails through the brush at the base of the mounds. Shellah couldn't tell if they were paths made by the Auckland people or those left by the aurochs herd. Eventually the trail ended. Nessa pointed her master towards a tumulus alone in the distance, its head obscured in the low clouds. "Over there." "Let me go first," said Shellah. "I know bogs well. I'll try to keep us out of the muckier spots." She slowly forged a path ahead, keeping them on the sturdier tussocks as they approached the barrow. As she neared its wall, her boot slipped and she felt something crunch underfoot. As she yanked her foot out, she saw it was stuck in an ancient, rotted rib cage. A human skull was nearby. Other mossy bones became distinct amongst the grasses. She shook her foot free of the skeleton, holding her hand up for the others to stop, then drew her sword. "I think we're here." Jonas came up next to her and knelt to investigate the bones. "What do you think? Hogboon or some other cause? These skeletons look really old." "No idea." She poked at one with her sword's tip to see some rotting clothes and leather. "Looks like whatever happened, they died right here." She saw Lowell start to wander ahead. "That hogboon is somewhere. Let's stick together." They circumnavigated the mound, finding the human remains scattered about it in a ring and no clearly marked entry near the bottom. The clouds parted for a moment to reveal 2 tall rows of stones far above. "Shellah, how about you and I climb up and investigate those menhirs while Jonas assists Nessa with finding an entrance? I'd like to see if they have any marks upon them. Maybe they'll help," said Lowell. As there was no sign yet of the hogboon, she nodded and scrambled up the steep side of the barrow to its top. A cold afternoon sun shone at the top of the mound. Shellah gasped as she saw how close they were to the edge of the summit, the ocean far below, dotted to the north with the uninhabited rocky isles of the outer Shielings. To the west were the shadowed humps of Auckland. She pivoted to look back from where they came. All the other mounds were clustered closer to where they had entered the moorland. Lowell motioned her over to view the standing stones. There were 2 rows, one so ancient its pictographs were barely visible in the weathered striped rock, the other more recently and crudely hewn. "Does any of this make sense to you?" asked Shellah. She traced a triple spiral on one of the older rocks, the ancient symbol of the sea goddess and patroness of the Shielings, Finna. A similar sigil decorated her own cloak pin. "I believe this is indeed the site," said Lowell. "These newer markings are in the Laren." He was interrupted by a loud roar. Nessa shrieked. Shell, Lowell, you better get down here," she heard Jonas shout. "We've got company." "Lowell, stay put. Stay hidden behind the stones if you can. Jonas, I'm coming!" Shellah shouted as she cast off her pack and slid back down the mound. She drew her blade as she came to the foot of the slope next to Jonas, Nessa still protected behind his back. The hogboon loomed over them, much taller than she remembered from its first visit on the beach. It opened its fetid jaws and roared. "Go up to Lowell and try to figure out how we get rid of this thing, and hide!" she hissed at Nessa. "If things get too quiet, run back to the boat and get out of here." Jonas parried the enraged hogboon as Shellah joined in the fray. It screamed, furious. The hogboon whipped around to slash at her with its thorn-clawed hands. Jonas swung wide to cast it back, slashing through the thistles and brush that comprised much of the hogboon. The half-decayed ram skull of the creature gaped as it reformed itself effortlessly. Shellah coughed at its putrid bog stink. It raised both arms high to strike her. As she attempted to block, her sword got caught in the tattered plaid of the creature's cloak, and she thought she saw the glint of a green corroded bronze cloak pin. It bore the triple spiral of Finna? Jonas cut through the leg of the hogboon from behind. It stumbled, but turned back swiftly as it healed, the two pieces of bracken knitting themselves together seamlessly. "Lol!" Shellah shouted as she attempted to pull on the hogboon's cloak to distract it as it swiped at Jonas from below. The fabric shredded and she fell back, catching her balance hard as her knee twisted. She gasped as she crumpled down. "The token isn't inside the mound! It's on the mound! It's on the mound! The triple spiral on top of the old rock at the east end!" "What do I do?" she heard from above. The hogboon growled at her as it swung back around, thrashing its long arms towards her face. She slashed its legs as Jonas hit it hard from behind. The hogboon turned its grisly head to face up the slope of the mound. They would only be able to distract it for so long. "Break it off somehow and toss it down," she hollered back up. "With what?" Shellah groaned. "Finna, protect me," as she grumbled. She struggled to get back up. "There's a small shovel in my pack, try that." She smacked at the hogboon's knee as it returned its fury to Jonas. "Where's your pack?" "We're a little busy down here. Figure it out," she shouted up the hill. The hogboon snarled back at her. Jonas gave it a quick whack, just enough to turn its attention back towards him. With a strong backhand sweep, Shellah's sword clove through the grassy neck of the creature, and its sheep's head rolled towards the bog. Its body convulsed in the battle-broken tussocks. "Do you think it's slain?" Jonas asked, panting. She shuddered for a moment and rubbed her sore knee before rising. Nothing in guild training or her many years in merchant service had prepared her for fighting supernatural grave-protecting creatures. Even reavers were men. "No," she responded. "I think it'll pull itself back together in a moment." She kicked the head a little further away from the body as discouragement. "We don't have that much time," she shouted up the hill. Frustrated banging, then a loud crash echoed from above. "Got it!" A chunk of rock bounced down the side of the mound. The hogboon's body twitched, its skull starting to wiggle back towards its trunk. Sheathing her sword, Shellah hefted the stone and gave it a quick inspection against the hogboon's brooch while she could still easily view it. The triple spirals matched. "What are you going to do?" asked Jonas, as the hogboon's body shook more strongly, its head inching along the tussocks. "I'm going to lead it away from here, or try to anyway. She was tired and the stone was a little heavy. I don't think it'll hurt me as long as I carry this. Need any help?" "No." She looked up towards the top of the mound where she could see Nessa and Lowell silhouetted against the afternoon light. "See if they found anything? It's already the middle of the afternoon and we're still not done here. I'll be back." Shellah slowly started to limp back the way that they had come through the bog, and from the corner of her eyes she saw a tall shadow following behind, keeping pace but not approaching fast enough to overcome her. Nearby, she saw a shimmering pool reflecting the overcast skies above. Lowell had said a hogboon might be dispelled if its token was cast into a bog. She held the chunk of rock out, its triple spiral clearly visible at this angle. This was Finna's creature in Finna's own home. She felt the hogboon come to stand behind her. It smelled somehow less rank. "What do you think, hogboon? If I cast this stone into the water, does this free you?" "I am the last of my kind," the hogboon said, its voice croaking in its repaired throat of grass and twigs. "The last protector of this place." Shellah sighed. "Let's keep going then." She turned and continued her slow pace across the moor until she found the path through the other mounds, which she followed until she came to the barrow they had investigated earlier that day. She entered. Within an empty niche by the door, she placed the stone. She fumbled in her small belt pouch for the crumbled remains of her stale scone as an offering. It would have to do. "I hope you enjoy your new job, hogboon," Shellah said. "Protect our people and their spirits. This is a peaceful place. I have a feeling that other barrow came to house an evil man." "That mound's curse still stands, woman of the Shielings. It is not mine to dispel," she heard from outside. "But its doom will not come from my hands." The light was starting to fade for the day when Shellah exited the barrow. Backlit against the muted sunset, she could see what she thought was the hogboon, but wearing a fresh Akandi plaid and a proud white aurochs skull. Polished bronze gleamed at its throat. "Until we meet again, woman of the Shielings," the hogboon said, its voice much richer than before. May Finna protect us all, she said quietly, as she found the path back towards the others as the night fell on Mundy Head. If you are enjoying this story, please like and subscribe for the latest episodes. I aim to have fresh chapters here weekly. I hope to see you soon for our next episode.